Welcome to another episode of the brand called You. We've got lots and lots of very, very interesting people who bring to our show their knowledge, experience, and wisdom. And today I have a very, very accomplished lady, Poornima Savargaonkar, with me. Poornima, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mr. Ashutosh.
Poornima is an electronics and telecom engineer. She was a scientist with ISRO, and then she moved and founded a company, an organization called Enriched Soil and Soul Private Limited. She's a car rallyist. She's a poet. She's an awardee of the Innovative Farmer Award from ICAR, and she's accomplished a lot in her life. So, Poornima, tell me a little bit about your early life.
Thank you, Mr. Ashutosh. When we hear about ourselves, you feel like you're meeting yourself every time, for the first time. So thank you for a lovely introduction. So early life, I was born and brought up in a rural part of Maharashtra. My father being in government servant.
Right.
So till 10th, I studied in Marathi medium, typical Maharashtra school.
Right.
And after that, I chose to go to science college in Maharashtra. After 10th, we go to college.
Mhm.
So from there, my journey into science perhaps began.
Right.
And then graduated in engineering from a little bigger city called Aurangabad in
Right.
Maharashtra. So after that, I did a 1 year of lecturership in a private government college.
Mhm.
And there I felt that, I'm just teaching what I read from the book
Mhm.
and don't have any experience to give sound to my voice.
Mhm.
So I wanted to leave that, and I was looking for some industrial experience to apply, what I learned during
Right.
all my education.
Right.
That's when I got an opportunity to apply for ISRO,
Mhm.
and I got through in ISRO. So in ISRO, I was there in Ahmedabad for 13 years,
Okay.
and after that, I left ISRO and came to Gurgaon in 2002. So since
Okay.
then, I've been Gurgaon.
So, you mentioned that you were in a small city called Aurangabad.
Yeah.
When I used to work for ITC, that was
Uh-huh.
where I was transferred. So I was the financial controller of the ITC hotel there. So
Okay.
that was
So
in 1979. Long time.
79. So if you consider Aurangabad as a small city, Mr. Ashutosh,
It
my
is.
schooling happened in a town
Hmm.
called Parbhani, which is
Mhm. I know.
I think much smaller than Aurangabad.
I agree. I agree. So, Purnima, tell me, from space to Mother Earth, from ISRO to sustainable urban gardening. Tell me about this journey. Talk to me a little bit about the kind of work you were doing in ISRO and then what made you transition.
Okay. So let me tell about first two things together in single frame.
Mhm.
I think it's a story of fern and bamboo.
Okay.
The story goes like this, that God spread both the seeds on the earth at the same time.
Mhm.
While the fern grew faster, grew all over the earth, the bamboo was nowhere to be seen.
Mhm.
So after perhaps 4 5 years,
Yeah.
the bamboo shoot first started coming
Correct.
above the earth,
Yeah.
and then it was unstoppable.
Mhm.
So the god was wondering and asked the bamboo, when I spread both the seeds together,
Mhm.
what did you take so long to appear above the surface?
Correct.
So the bamboo said, I was developing my roots for 5 years.
Yeah, that's a great story.
So I think my ISRO happened because of my structured education, because of the ambition, because what society, parents, teacher want you to perform and use your education to earn repute, to earn bread and butter,
Right.
to support your family financially. So
Right.
like fun.
Right.
It happened with a structure, it happened with a speed, it
Mhm.
happened with all guidance, and it was all over.
Right.
But I think my love for nature was like seed of bamboo.
Okay.
So it always persisted within me.
Huh.
It always remained there because I remember even when I was a bachelor, I
Mhm.
always had a few planted pots around me.
Mhm.
And I have said in my interviews, I always saw my parents gardening
Wonderful.
and doing food gardening, doing exotic flowers gardening. So I think gardening was just rooted inside
Correct.
me.
Very interesting.
And after I left ISRO and came to Gurgaon, I really didn't have anything because coming from a scientific background,
Right.
coming from that structure of ISRO,
Right.
Gurgaon didn't have that opportunity to offer me anything to. So I think that bamboo started shooting up, and my love for nature started showing up with the speed of bamboo.
Wonderful.
So even after I got married, I had family, I had children, I always had plants around.
Fantastic.
I had fruiting plants, fruiting trees in my garden, a small garden. And after coming from that rigor of 9 to 6, whatever little I could do, till date, those trees exist in my Ahmedabad home.
Amazing. Okay, so you were speaking about growing your roots, of course, but being surrounded by plants in Ahmedabad and in Gurgaon. Tell me a little bit about Enriched Soil and Soul Private Limited.
Oh, yeah. So it so happened that I was facing many challenges while growing food, particularly here in Gurgaon weather. And then I observed my gardeners around whose gardens used to be beautiful.
Hmm.
One thing I noticed starkingly was
Hmm.
people generally prefer seasonal gardening here.
Right.
It's like season changes, you sow some seeds, buy some flower plants, and they die, and then you throw them away and then go for the next season. And this continues over years and year and season by season.
Correct.
I hardly met any gardener who stored seeds for his or her next season. I hardly met a gardener who ventures into perennial trees, perennial plants in contained area. I hardly met gardeners who grew their own food.
Hmm.
So then I thought that I have always seen my parents doing this. They never did one type of gardening. They
Right.
always gave importance to growing food. They
Right.
always gave importance to having trees around.
Hmm.
Even if it is just a nimbu and kadipatta ka tree, but the trees were essential part of my parents' ever-changing garden, ever-changing, because
Right.
my father was in a transferable job.
Right.
So then I tried doing that and came across drastic failures and setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
But in ISRO, my one of my main jobs was failure analysis of satellites.
Hmm.
So those 13 years of ISRO trained me to consider failure as a new opportunity to do something in a fresher way, in new way, or look at the same thing with a new vision.
I see.
Till you analyze and till you get the feedback, you implement those corrections in your system and then achieve what you perhaps call success.
Very interesting.
Otherwise, my training in ISRO was like failure. We used to say, wow, I got that failure, that kind.
Correct.
So I implemented that and that came handy to me without my knowledge or without my purposefully introducing that failure analysis into my gardening.
Hmm.
So when I started analyzing, I felt that here soil, air, and water, all the three, which are basic needs of a plant to grow healthy and to grow perennially, are challenged. The soil here is very coarse, sandy, it's like a rock dust with a pH anything above 8. To bring pH from 8 to 7.5, perhaps you need years and years. And what plants need is the ideal pH of 7, 7.5. So then air is dry. Most of the time of the year, air is very dry. And the water is very hard water here with, TDS of the order of 800, 900, 1200. So then I did a little bit of research, I started contacting people around our country. And then I realized, okay, when I can't do anything much about water and air, I can do something with the soil. And fortunately, people whom I contacted were organic gardeners and they were mostly from southern part of India. So I also felt orphaned because South India is blessed with air, water, and soil.
Right. Yes. In Goa, we certainly are not.
Yeah. So therefore, I took it as a challenge. I started studying more about soil. That is when my children were a bit grown up. I had some free time in my family. So I took a tour to South India, to Bangalore, to Chennai, to Pondicherry, to Madhya Pradesh. Even I kept going back to Maharashtra and started studying about air, water, and soil. And that's when I learned taking control of soil, and that is creating my own soil. So I got through many eureka moments of creating this soil. And after I was settled and very happy with my own garden, Doordarshan Kisan had once approached me for one episode on my soil technology. So I happily gave because I wanted to give this message of a good soil to all urban gardeners. And after that episode, I will say people literally pushed me into enriched soil and soul. They said, yes, we understand this problem, but now we want a ready-made solution. As you have already spent your so many years into this search, why don't you provide us this soil? So that's how this venture of enriched soil and soul came into
Who
it.
knows, maybe we'll start seeing Poornima's Amrit Mitti being taken by ISRO to the moon for.
I wish, I wish, because if the ISRO scientists and all over the space scientists are looking for life in space, so perhaps this carbonaceous soil can give them some lead.
So, moving on, Poornima, you speak about reduce, reuse, and recycle.
Yeah.
Uh, Till a few years ago, nobody really bothered, but now I see an increasing awareness. I think this awareness is coming through our children.
Yeah.
How does reducing, reusing, and recycling affect each one of us personally?
I think each one of us has traveled a long, long way away from the nature. I'll give you a small example of plastic.
Hmm.
Contradictorily, plastic is made from all the natural elements,
Correct.
which otherwise are quite reusable, recyclable in the nature. But when we combine them and make plastic, now the same plastic is towering in front of our lives and consuming our earth, consuming air pollution, everywhere the plastic pollution, we are calling it pollution. So that is the difference when we look at our resources which are natural, which were at a certain point of time. They were enough for every life on the earth. But we have overused those resources in past few decades. When we have overused the resources, we are calling ourselves very technologically advanced population. So I think our challenge of using technology for our own betterment to either generate resources or create resources from the abundance of non-degradable material that we have already created.
Correct.
So I think as educated people, as technology people, that is our challenge. And therefore, each one of us who is today a only waste generator. So if we convert ourselves from the waste generator to either waste reducer or waste reuser, I think we are just taking our resources for a longer time. Otherwise, which the world is telling us that the resources are limited and they might be over soon, very soon, sooner than what we think. So
Absolutely.
if we use our education, our technology to circulate these resources, whatever we have created many non-degradable and wrong things for the nature. But if we just bring them back into our system rather than throwing them on landfills, I think our journey will go a bit longer.
So one more question on enriched soil and soul before I move to some personal questions, Poornima.
Yeah.
Tell me, how are millennials and the Gen Zs changing the entire concept? I mean, I find my children who are older, but certainly millennials, they're so much more aware
Yes.
than I was. What are your thoughts?
I agree with you completely. because we, I think, were the luckiest generation to have a perfect balance of everything in life.
Correct.
It was balance of finances, it was balance of time, it was balance of control, it was a balance of, resources, balance of freedom. I think our next generation has escalated logarithmically into all these domains that I'm saying. They are suddenly, leap ahead in time, in management, in resources, in finances, in their understandings, and in the information that is around them. Therefore, their freedom, their control, everything is logarithmically ahead. So, therefore, they are more aware, because it's finally the management. What our generation is also doing is just managing. So, we had perhaps, in the modulation of time scale, we had perhaps longer gaps. But this generation is in a digital era. It's 0 1 0 1 0 1. It's nothing analog. It's nothing between 0 and 1. It's either 0 or 1. So therefore, they are more aware, and therefore they are more challenged to our generation as parents to understand them, to give them the same freedom, to give them the control vis-a-vis freedom, and to give them the right path among so many options available to them.
Amazing. Amazing. So, Poonima, I have time for a few questions for you personally. My first question is that, in such a successful career or life, where you've actually transitioned from science into the Mother Earth, of course, using a lot of science there also, are there any people who've had an influence on your life? And if yes, give me two people about and what you've learned from them.
Lovely. So first I will give my teacher of my primary school, founder of my school, Shivankar Gurji, who is known fondly as. So he was the founder of your school, Mr. Ashutosh, and he was polio affected. He could barely move his limbs. The only part of his body that we saw as children. I was in fourth grade when I met him first time, and when I saw him as a teacher. So it was only perhaps his head and eyes and nose and all. The vision of a personality that he inculcated me as a child, I think, stays with me till today.
Amazing.
And the second influencing person on my life was my mother. My mother, we all children used to call her Hitler Reborn, but she, was the greatest critic, the greatest challenger, and the greatest, I should say, a major of my success. She taught me that your education is nothing if you are only able to read and write what is being written and given to you. Your education doesn't come without practicing your culture and having enough experiences on what you are reading or writing. Then it is called education. Otherwise, the degrees that you are showing to me are merely a stamp to earn bread.
Amazing. Well done. Well said. So tell me, what would be three words that define Poornima?
Connect, confidence, and resolution of thoughts.
Very nice. And connect, I'm assuming, is with people and Mother Earth.
Connect with everything, Mr. Ashutosh. In this venture called Enriched Soil and Soul, what I'm trying to do is, why am I, inspiring people to grow food? Because I'm finding that we have lost connect with the food that we eat. That's the basic cause. Therefore, we don't bother where does it come from, where does it go to. We don't bother throwing it away. We don't bother bargaining for that 5 rupees for a farmer without understanding. So connect with everything that you do since you get up in the morning.
Well said. Very nice. So my next question to you is that if you were a role model to millions of children who followed your life choices, and you have made some amazing life choices, what would be the one thing you would change in yourself?
I would be more humble.
Okay.
I think I lack that
More than you are
humility.
now, despite achieving
Yes,
so much.
much more than what I am now.
Okay.
Because again, I'll quote my mother. I remember I had lost my medical seat by 1 mark
Mhm.
in when after I completed my 12th, and I was crying and crying and crying. I was howling like, just 1 mark. Why did this God do to me? So that time my mother had said, my dear, that 1 mark is lack of humility.
Mm.
So if you had pursued your path, your study, your planning, your vision, your dream with being more humble towards your studies, towards your teachers, towards the guidance that you were getting, perhaps you would have got that 1 mark.
So, Purnima, my last question to you. There are thousands of people will watch your and my conversation.
Yeah.
What would your advice be to a young individual starting off their life and, professionals, entrepreneur? I mean, you've done everything. What would your advice be to them?
My advice first always remain connected.
Correct.
Even if you are studying, remain connected. You are starting a venture, remain connected to your very thought of starting a venture and the product or the idea that you are wanting to bring it up. Never lose your connect. That is my first. Second is be thorough in whatever you do. If you are thinking, be thorough. If you are creating, you are doing R&D, be thorough. If you are reading a book, be thorough. Read it word by word, pause by pause, even your own R&D. And third, I would say, be your own critic.
Very nice. This is the first time I've heard someone say, be your own critic. That's a very, very nice.
Being your own critic, I think, gives you a freedom and a liberty to innovate more, to understand yourself better, and therefore again remain connected with yourself. Unless we are connected with ourselves, we will not have connect with anything else in life.
Very well said. Purnima, thank you very much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. And I wish you lots and lots of success.
Thank you, Mr. Ashutosh. Thank you for having me over on this forum of yours, and thank you very much for this
Thank
opportunity. I wish all the best to the viewers and to your venture as well.
Thank you for listening to the brand called You Videocast and Podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.